Okay, we are live with episode 17 of Container Bytes. God, I am exhausted from 2026 already. There's just, Greenland, Iran, Venezuela, everywhere. And we're going to touch on all of them. I think last week, Greenland was the big story. Judah, has the Greenland trade war developed at all? Where does it leave us right now in terms of US trade?
Yeah, so pretty much like almost as quickly as it started, it ended with Greenland. So the weekend before last, President Trump made these statements on social media about threatening tariffs and possible military action. And then by last Wednesday, already the threat was called off after the president in Davos met with NATO leadership and came out saying he had a framework for a future deal. So this kind of threat of tariffs and then removal, and then there's still a lot of lack of clarity of what will actually happen in terms of Greenland, but that has sort of passed. But there's been other trade war drama since then. So just this week, the president has threatened 25% tariffs on all exports from South Korea because South Korea hasn't yet approved the trade deal in or kind of ratified it in Parliament, and that they agreed to with the U.S. late last year. And he also on social media threatened 100% tariffs on Canada following a trade deal that Canada finalized with China, which is really kind of specific to certain goods, allowing a kind of a quota of Chinese EVs into Canada, and China committing to buying, I think, canola seeds or other specific goods like that.
Wow, that's really interesting. So that's already going out past US import or export and suddenly trying to dictate to other countries what their relationships would be with other trading partners. I think we also saw this when during the conflict with Iran, and we'll get to that a little bit sooner about threatening sanctions on countries that trade with Iran. Uh, are there other places where this is popping up, like more US intervention in global trade besides US imports?
Certainly, there have been other threats, but the trend that we're kind of seeing is other countries getting closer to other countries besides the US. So we just mentioned Canada. Canada has sent a delegation to India. The EU just announced a very big free trade deal with India. UK has, there are talks of other countries like the UK and Germany getting a little bit closer to China. So this is one of the impacts of the trade war, is we're really seeing diversification. And actually, global trade has grown since the beginning of the trade war, even if trans-Pacific trade has dropped somewhat. And that's because other trading partners are getting closer to other trading partners through this diversification, which is one of the things that we're certainly seeing.
Interesting. So it's like as America's going more America first, every other country is also saying, "Hey, I need to also double down and go Canada first or India first." What about Iran? That's been coming up, and then I think it's kind of like been here and then gone. I know there's more threats. There's a military exercise going on right now that was maybe creating some waves for potential military action. What is the impact on global trade right now?
Yeah, so during the initial turmoil a few weeks ago in Iran, President Trump had made threats of strikes on Iran, and that had increased the likelihood of Iran closing the Strait of Hormuz. And that kind of subsided as things kind of subsided there. As you said, now there's a buildup of military assets by the U.S. in the Middle East and anticipations of a possible strike on Iran. We've seen some air carriers cancel flights into the Middle East for that reason. So anytime there's kind of this increased tension, there's the increased likelihood that something like that would happen. A closure of the Strait of Hormuz, as we said before, it wouldn't be the biggest deal for container trade because only about 2-3% of global container volumes will go through the strait. It would shut off access to Dubai's port of Jebel Ali, which is a big transshipment hub. So that would cause some disruptions, but I don't think it would be overall very disruptive to container shipping, although for oil will be a different story. And then the final thing is that just this week, the Houthis have released a video implying that if the U.S. intervenes in Iran, they will renew strikes in the Red Sea, which there haven't been any strikes since back in October. So that'll be a further development. But still, for container trade, the vast majority is still diverting around the Cape of Good Hope, so it probably wouldn't have the biggest impact.
Well, I mean, the Red Sea is actually a huge wild card, right? And just last week we were talking about how there's more kind of graded, careful experimentation and expansion towards the Red Sea. This could just go back and set it back a couple of months if even one incident takes place. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. As we've seen, really CMA, CGM, and Maersk are the ones who've been really starting to send entire services through. And then just last week, CMA said they are re-diverting one of the services that they reverted to the Red Sea. So yeah, there's steps forward and steps back. If there were renewed attacks, obviously that would change the timeline.
Well, let's get into the rates, right? I mean, in the background, getting a little bit closer to the Lunar New Year on February 17th. Maybe before the numbers, remind us what typically happens in the build up towards the Lunar New Year, and then we can talk a little bit about where air and ocean rates are.
Yeah, so Lunar New Year, it's a 1 week holiday in China, national holiday, but it's really kind of a 3 week slowdown in terms of manufacturing and logistics because a lot of people travel. So the week before, there is a big slowdown as people are leaving, and the week after is also when things are still quite slow before they ramp up as people get back to work. And because of that, there's a 3 week inability to get out as much goods or orders as you'd like. Usually we see a pull forward of demand in the weeks before Lunar New Year. And that's kind of what we've seen now. Asia, Europe, the rates have already kind of leveled off. And same thing for Trans-Pacific. They started climbing a little bit more significantly for Asia, Europe, and a little bit earlier than usual, which is probably, again, because of back to the Red Sea. If you didn't get goods out before Lunar New Year, then you're going to wait even longer afterwards. But we're starting to see demand cool now. We've seen rates level off to both, which is a little bit earlier than usual, but within the normal range. And we've seen reports that carriers are already offering discounts on the rates that are kind of coming through in the benchmark. So we'll probably start to see rates decline, which again is maybe a little bit earlier than usual, but kind of pretty typical for this time of year. The other kind of wild card in terms of rates right now for Asia Europe is that there is a rail strike in Belgium. And so that's going to impact port operations in Antwerp, and it might have knock-on effects in some of the other hubs like Hamburg or Rotterdam.
Interesting. And I know that on Freightos Marketplace, at least with like smaller importers, we're seeing about a 10% decrease in searches. If you look at that 3 week window before Lunar New Year compared to previous years, I think it's very much in line with where general tariffs are. Usually we see the peak about a week to 2 weeks before Lunar New Year, but as you say, definitely a little bit more muted than past years. On the air cargo front, anything to look out for?
Yeah, so we actually have seen in air cargo some increase in rates from China to US and also Southeast Asia. So rates are above $6.25 per kilo as of last week. And that's probably some pre-Lunar New Year demand there, which I think is a little surprising that you've seen kind of more muted for ocean, but kind of stronger for air cargo. And I think it's kind of this mix of different types of goods. It might be a little bit better terms for electronics and things like that. Higher value goods that are coming out now in that apparently there's demand.
All right, and then I think last thing to end out with here, massive snowstorm in the United States. What was the impact on logistics?
Yeah, so part of the increase in air cargo rates might be due to the storm. There's been a lot of flight cancellations that reduces available capacity. But yeah, through the weekend, it was very, very disruptive. Sunday, there was a record number of flights canceled in the US. I think some estimates had it like 14,000, which was the most since the pandemic. And it's kind of eased since then, but still really significant. So Monday, I think there were still like 6,000 flights canceled. And then Tuesday down to 1,000. And at that point, it was really more concentrated in the Northeast because the storm started in the Southeast and Southern Midwest and then moved to the North. So what you were seeing in terms of closures was earlier in more Southern and then later towards the Northeast. So we saw ports that were closed or really disrupted in the South already starting to open by Monday, whereas like the Port of New York, New Jersey was still mostly closed on Monday, but things are kind of gradually reopening. Tuesday as well. We started to see fewer flight cancellations, as I said. There's also a lot of very cold temperatures that are going to persist for a couple of days, and that means a lot of ice. So especially in the southern part of the U.S. where they're not used to kind of dealing with that kind of weather, it might take a little longer. And of course, aside from air and ocean, which you mentioned, it's very disruptive to trucking too. But we're going to start to see a gradual recovery.
Great. Yeah, we need to find some more good news to squeeze into this. This gets depressing. All right, well, Judah, thank you so much. Here's hoping for some good news next week.